Chapter 13. A New Civilization. Anastasia was sitting beneath the cedar tree, wearing a light gray flaxen dress. With her arms around her knees, her head slightly lowered, she was gazing out at the smooth surface of the lake. I didn't go up to her right away. For a while I stood at a distance, observing this recluse quietly sitting there by the lake shore. No, that description really doesn't fit Anastasia. The word recluse is better suited to the people who live in modern apartments. People live in these apartments and don't even know their neighbors sharing the same floor. Footnote: in contrast with North American practice, Russian apartment blocks, even the ones that appear massive from the outside, are usually divided into vertical sections, each with its own exterior entrance, stairs, and lift, or elevator. A given section may have 4 to 6 flats per floor around the stairwell, and a little shaft. Hence, there would not be very many neighbors sharing the same floor. They walk along the street and couldn't care less about the people they meet, and their attitude is entirely reciprocal. So while there's nothing frightening in someone living alone, it's a lot more frightening when they're alone amongst people like themselves. And so, even though Anastasia was sitting here alone on the shore of this taiga lake, her heart was beating in unison with millions of human hearts all over the world. Some call her their friend, some their sister, feeling like they're related to her. In the meantime, her soft-spoken words wing their way through the endless flow of information thundering and dundering from TV screens and a host of other media. Her words waft by, and people pick them up, and people who catch them may respond with guitar strings and songs, and often with actions. They retune their life anew. And grandfather, I saw for the first time how fervently he expressed himself as he asked me to have a word with Anastasia about eternity. I sat down beside her, and she turned her gaze toward me. I felt a calming sense from the tender gaze of her grayish-blue eyes. For a time, we simply sat and looked at each other. I couldn't help myself, but took her hand, gave it a quick kiss, and then replaced it on her knees. Her cheeks were aflush with a soft glow, her eyelashes all aflutter. Without rhyme or reason, a sense of unease came over me. How strange to feel uneasy over a woman one has known for 10 years, and how delightful. And in an attempt to overcome my sense of awkwardness and unease, I broke the silence first. I was just talking with your grandfather just now, Anastasia. For some reason, he quite unexpectedly and rather excitedly started saying something about humanity's need for words on eternity. He said these words should be the kind people can grasp, not just with their mind or intellect, but with their feelings. Are these words really that important? Yes, they are important, Vladimir. But it is not the words that are important, but rather people's conscious awareness. Words, of course, are necessary to bring it forth. A conscious awareness of eternal life will help perfect man's way of life. Footnote: as noted earlier in footnote 7, chapter 9, the Russian phrase for way of life is literally image of life. But what connection is there between our way of life and becoming consciously aware of eternity? A direct connection. People today believe that they have only a few decades to live, after which they must leave life behind and disappear into oblivion. Yet all along, man's life can be eternal. This must be brought out so that everyone, or at least most people, may understand. But you've talked about that already, and I've included your words on this subject in several of my books. Yes, I did, but evidently what I said has not been understood, or the frailty of human existence has been drummed into people's consciousness too strongly over the millennia. New words and arguments must be found. So, can you try to find them? I shall try. We need to look for them, apparently, along with those who do understand. But tell me in your own words first. Fine, perhaps we should put it this way. Most people living on the earth believe that they plan out their own life. They choose a profession, start a family, have children, or alternatively decline to have children. But in many respects, their decisions are not their own. A great influence is exercised upon them by somebody else's will, acting through public opinion. For example, you have an object called a clothes hanger. At one point, somebody decided to perfect this object by using man himself as a clothes hanger. This gave rise to the profession that you call modeling, from the word model. It is not an enviable profession. It is not part of man's destiny. But somebody decided to make it one of the most attractive professions of all, and did so. They began to show off live models in a variety of color magazine photos and TV shows, and describe their supposedly happy lives, to tell about all the money they make and how rich people want to marry them. Millions of young girls began to dream of becoming the world's next top model, and thereby attaining happiness. Millions of young girls all over the world began resorting to all sorts of measures in an effort to achieve this illusory glory. 1 in a million made it as a famous model, essentially becoming a walking clothes hanger. The others experienced deep disappointment in their lives, as their dream was not fulfilled. And this was due to their failure to determine their own destiny. They had begun structuring their lives under the influence of somebody else's will. There are many other examples that could be cited of men and women, and even children, chasing illusory values, neglecting their own purpose and destiny. Tell me what you think, Vladimir. If human society is made up of people like that, where can it be heading? It's heading nowhere. That kind of human society. Out there in our country, Russia, not a single political party, nor the state as a whole, has put forth any kind of program for building the future. From what you have told me, Anastasia, I'm particularly interested in the definition of man's purpose and destiny. What does it consist of? How can people discover it? Let your thought, Vladimir, as well as other people's thoughts, try to grasp hold of God's creations, His program, His dream. Is that really possible? Grasping hold of God's dream, I mean? It is possible. After all, He has hidden nothing, and still hides nothing from people, from children who are His very own. He has written no scholarly tomes. Everything by example He has shown. And the first thing everyone needs to understand and feel is which of man's deeds to eternity lead. Think for yourself, Vladimir. Why did not God, who created the living and multifaceted world, not create things like the car, or the TV, and the spaceship in their present form? Perhaps He simply wasn't up to the job, whereas man is. God created everything man needs. Man has within himself a means of transportation, as well as imagination, through which he can see far better pictures than are shown on TV. Man is also capable of affecting the mastery of other planets of the universe without the aid of primitive artificial projectiles. It was God who determined man's purpose and destiny, as well as the program of development for all life in the universe. To attain the required understanding, man needs to refrain from destroying his program and to study for all he's worth and ascertain the purpose of everything on the earth. Immortality. God created man immortal. To witness this, only 3 conditions are required to be observed. First, create a living space which will attract man to itself, and to which man has aspired. Second, there should be somewhere on the earth at least one person who thinks of you with kindness and love. Third, never even admit the thought that you can be overtaken by death, and this is extremely important. Even if you suggest to someone who is simply falling asleep that he is dying and he believes it, then he will die in obedience to his thought. But even if an elderly man, in earth terms, wears out his body and is lying at death's door, but does not think about death, but pictures his life in the living space he has been creating, he will be born anew. Such is the law of the universe. The universe will not stand by and allow a life-creating thought to die. You have a concept in your world known as natural selection. Even now, God's program is selecting the best of everything for a re-embodiment. Before, however, there was not much to choose from. Now it is showing a multifold increase. Whoever builds a domain with love will be reincarnated again and again. Whatever interferes with them will disappear from the earth forever, giving way to the birth of a new civilization. But why a new civilization? I asked. If the people are going to be the same, with the same vegetation and the same planet. The new civilization, Vladimir, will be characterized by a new conscious awareness as well as by new perceptions of the surrounding world. This great principle that has been given birth in people today will remain invisible to ordinary sight until the appearance of the planet known as Earth has changed. It will affect life in the universe as a whole. But how can the universe change as a result of the Earth's appearance? It can, Vladimir. Even though our planet is but a small particle, it is in close interaction with all other parts of the universe. Even if one small particle should change, its changes can influence the whole spectrum of the universe. Most interesting. But couldn't you show me, Anastasia, a scene from the future as to how the universe might change? I can indeed. Take a look. Love creating worlds. Spring was in full bloom on the planet Arita. Footnote: the Russian name here is actually Yelmeza, derived from the word Zemlya, or earth, spelled backwards. Herbs very similar to those on earth, along with the flowers on trees and bushes, were giving off their sweet scent. A young man named Vladislav was walking along a pathway amidst the springtime splendor, on his way to a symposium. He was to give a talk on the origins of the life on the planet Arita. His debating opponent would be his childhood friend, Vladimir. Footnote: Vladislav, a common Russian masculine name originally meaning born in love and glory, although often associated with the meaning ruler of praise. The subsequent variant, Vladishek, is an endearing form of this name. Radomir, a Russian masculine name derived from the words rad, joyful, and mir, peace. At 19 years old, Vladislav had an adequate store of data to defend his theory before scholars at any level, but the knowledge possessed by his friend Radomir was no less in scope. Radomir and his team would pounce on any weak points or unsupported reasoning in Vladislav's arguments regarding events in the past. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Liudmila. Liudmila? I just call her Mila for short. Mila would be there too. Mila, as it happened, both lads had been in love with this girl right from childhood. They loved her, but never admitted it. Never admitted it either to each other or to the girl. Instead, they were waiting for Mila herself to give some kind of indication as to whom she preferred. Lyudmila, a common Russian feminine name derived from the roots Lyud, people, and Mil, deer. Vladislav had deliberately chosen a roundabout route to where the symposium was being held in order to give more thought to his presentation, but something was interfering with his concentration. He had the impression that somebody was watching him. Upon hearing a rustle behind him, he did a sharp about-face. Someone darted from the path into the bushes and was lying still in the tall grass. Vladislav took a few steps back the way he had come and caught sight of a figure hiding in the grasses under a bush. It was his 4-year-old sister, Katya. Footnote, Katya, an endearing form of the feminine name Yekaterina, derived from the Greek word katharos, or pure, related to Catherine in English. The subsequent variant Katerinka conveys a hint of brotherly condescension. So, Katerinka, you've latched onto me again, eh? Vladislav tenderly addressed his sister. I've got an important presentation coming up. Maybe you don't realize it, but you're getting in the way. Or maybe you do realize it, otherwise you wouldn't be hiding there in the grasses. I'm not hiding, I'm just lying here, replied Katya. I'm looking at this flower and all the different little bugs. And she made it look as though she really were interested in a particular little flower. Well now, then you can just go on lying there and looking at them. I'm off. Katya jumped up at once and ran over to Vladislav. Go ahead, Vadishek. She started rattling off. I'll follow you ever so quietly, so as not to interfere with your thinking. When we get to the place where all the people are, you take me by the hand so that everyone can see what a handsome and clever big brother I have. Okay, don't try to sweet talk me. Here, give me your hand. Only remember, when I or someone else is presenting, do not even think of criticizing what the grown-ups say, like last time. Katerinka, now satisfied, grasped hold of Vladislav's hand and promised, I shall try with all my might not to criticize. Representatives of the different regions of the planet, Arita, both young and old, filled the natural amphitheater. Nobody carried pens, notepads, or any kind of writing material. Their natural memory allowed them to memorize what they had heard, down to the minutest detail. Vladislav carried no exhibits with him as he walked out onto the stage. With just the power of his thought, he was able to create holograms in space to show any scenes from the past that he wished, or reproduce household objects, or even feelings. With just a hint of uneasiness, Vladislav began his presentation. The planet on which we live is called Arita. It is more than 90 sextillion years old, but life began here no more than 300 years ago. For originating life here, we are indebted to our forebears, two inhabitants of the planet Earth. To put it more specifically, the originating of life on the planet Arita was due to the influence of the energy of love and the dream of two inhabitants of the planet Earth. For this reason, I offer to you some historical information about life on the planet Earth. The earliest period of people's life on the Earth was quite possibly similar to our own. They had a good knowledge and feeling of their planet and the purpose of the universe. Earth dwellers determined the purpose of all the living organisms on their planet and made efficient use of them. But one day a disaster occurred. The consciousness of one of the Earth's inhabitants was invaded by a virus, which soon spread intensively among the other inhabitants of the planet. Our scientists have termed this virus death. The outward signs of this virus, as indicated by historical records, are characterized as follows. The people infected by it start to destroy their own perfect variety of life on the planet, creating in its place a primitive artificial world. This period of life, Earth dwellers themselves referred to as the technocratic age. The people infected by the death virus began mutating from rational beings into anti-rational beings. They gathered together in large numbers on small plots of land and built themselves dwellings that looked like tombstones. Stone tombs, piled one on top of the other. Picture to yourselves a stone mountain with a whole lot of burrows hollowed out in it. It was something quite similar to these stone mountains that people built with their hands and called them apartment blocks. The tomb burrows in this artificial mountain were called apartments. A massive concentration of these artificial stone mountains with their burrows piled up one beside the other was called a city. These so-called cities were filled with air unfit to breathe and water unfit to drink, along with stale food. Even during the earth dweller's lifetime, various organs of the human anatomy would begin to decay and decompose. Of course, it is difficult to imagine human bodies walking around containing decaying and decomposing organs, but that's exactly how it was. Historical sources indicate that people of the technocratic age even had a science they call medicine. They considered it to be one of the big achievements of this science They considered one of the big achievements of this science to be the ability to replace their internal organs. People did not understand that the very existence of such a science proved the inadequacy of their consciousness. It was not only people's flesh that was subject to decomposition. There was an ingestive degradation of their mind and consciousness, too. Their thought slowed down. They even lost the ability to compute sums and invented a calculator. They lost their ability to create holograms in space and invented a device they call a television, a primitive mechanism displaying something like a hologram. They lost the ability to move themselves through space and began building artificial devices known as cars, aeroplanes, and spaceships. From time to time, certain groups of people would attack other groups, and they would kill each other. But, most incredible of all, the death virus gave people the notion that they were not eternal, but existed only temporarily in the space that they could mentally grasp hold of. More and more, the actions of people of the technocratic age transformed the planet Earth into a foul-smelling, smoke-stenched corner of the universe. But the mind of the universe kept waiting for something and refrained from destroying this deleterious place in the galaxy. "Stop, please, for a moment." Vladislav's presentation was interrupted by a voice coming from the group of his debating opponents, headed by his friend Vladimir. "It's senseless to continue with your talk. It would have been impossible for something like that to happen on the Earth." "All right, I shall break off my presentation if you can really prove the improbability of what I have said." From among the group of opponents, one young man stood up and argued as follows. "We have reliable reports about the existence of religion in Earth society. Religious treatises talked about the Earth and everything growing thereon as being created by the mind of the universe, which they called God. They worshipped him and performed many rituals in his honor. I trust, my dear presenter, you will not deny that fact?" "No, I shan't deny it," replied Vladislav. "Then tell me, how could they perform rituals in honor of their God and at the same time destroy his creations? It would be impossible to do both at the same time. Consequently, these densely populated cities you speak of could not have existed on the earth, and people could not have fouled the water created for them by the God that they worshipped. In any case, the mind of the universe could not have countenanced such chaos, or he himself could not have been termed a mind. On the contrary, it would call into question any speck of rationality in what he created. Man first and foremost, what have you to say to this, my honorable presenter? I say that the existence of a mind, especially of the universe, is the union of two great principles, mind and anti-mind. The age of the anti-mind was necessary for the people of the planet Earth, and if you will permit me, in the next part of my presentation, I shall prove the existence of two great principles in man. Fine then, carry on, the young man agreed, and sat down. Vladislav continued his presentation, now more confidently. The world of the universe is the union of two opposites. Man also reflects this union of opposites within himself. Amidst the incredible chaos that has taken over Earth dwellers' consciousness, all at once there appeared people capable of understanding. These people changed their attitude towards Earth's creations, but not with words, and not through the aid of religious treatises. They began to change their way of life. While not yet fully comprehending the scope of their creation, they referred to their actions simply as the building of a family domain. They did not yet know that by approaching the Earth with a new conscious awareness, they were beginning to revitalize the planets of the universe. They did not yet know that for them death would no longer exist, or that the children they gave birth to would be called gods by their descendants. They were simply building their family domains on the planet Earth. In the meantime, the mind of the universe followed their activities with trembling anticipation, and eventually the day came when all the people of the Earth began to live in their marvelous domains. And the day came when, look, I shall show you a hologram. It has two people in it. In the space in front of the assembly appeared a three-dimensional earthly landscape. Two elderly people, a man and a woman, were walking hand in hand along a pathway leading from their domain to a nearby forest. They were clearly more than 100 years old. Evening was coming on, and the sky was filled with barely noticeable stars. The couple walked up to a cedar tree, and the elderly woman leant her back against it. Here I am a grandmother now, and a great-grandmother, too, the woman tenderly remarked to her companion. And you're still after me to go for the nighttime walk under a starry sky, just like we did when we were young. But isn't that what you want, too? Of course I do, my beloved. He quickly grabbed her by the shoulders, gave her an impetuous hug, and kissed her on the lips. Then he pushed the strap of her dress to one side, baring her shoulder. And now, bright moonlight clearly revealed 3 birthmarks, all in a row on the woman's left shoulder. The man kissed each of these in turn. You are just the same as you were before, my beloved. You are. I never want to part from you. And part we shall not. We shall die and be born anew. We can't afford to be born anew, she said sadly. Just look. There's hardly any free land left on the earth. It's all gardens and domains everywhere you look. And it's possible our grandchildren won't have enough room. Probably the Creator failed to take this into account when he created the earth. I don't think so. There is some kind of solution. We don't know what it is yet. I'm confident that our love cannot be interrupted. You and I shall die, to be born again. But where? Look, my beloved, on that star out there. Let our thought create life anew on that planet, similar to life on the earth. Think about it. Why else would God have thought to create so many planets? It can't just be a coincidence. Our thought has a material form. It will create life for us on that lifeless planet. We shall be re-embodied again and again. Our love will forever be the same. I thank you for this marvelous dream, my beloved. Indeed, I do. With you, I shall help you create life on that planet new. What shall we call it, my beloved, this planet of our new life? Arita, that's what it'll be called. Wait for us, Arita. In the meantime, you can blossom out in gardens and spread yourself with herbs, the way I desire, said the man, fervently and confidently. Me too, responded the woman. The hologram disappeared. Vladislav bowed to the assembly and stepped off to one side, making way for his friend and opponent, Vladimir. Vladimir stood in Vladislav's place, glanced around the gathering, and began to speak. I beg to disagree with my friend. I shall say right off, in his version of events, there is a great deal that is unprovable and even contradictory. Like my friends here, I cannot believe in the existence of a period in people's history which is so utterly absurd. The hologram he showed, as we all realize, is only a whim of his thought and imagination and is lacking in confirmation. Though this hologram gave me a strange kind of sensation. It seemed as though my learned friend had taken away from a story already known. I just can't recall what source it is from. A hushed whisper spread through the amphitheater, and cries of plagiarism could be heard. Could it be plagiarism? Unheard of, but perhaps the presenter didn't know. Plagiarism, yes, there's a distinct impression of something that we have seen before here. Vladislav stood to one side and hung his head. He shuddered upon hearing a child's cry from one of the back rows. Ah, his sister Katarinka kept calling out, refusing to be silenced. At least she's just calling out and not criticizing the proceedings, thought Vladislav, but he was wrong. After waiting for the inevitable silence to ensue, Katarinka declared in a loud voice, "Don't even think of arguing with my big brother, because he's very, very clever and sensitive too." Now there is a weighty argument, someone said, as snickering could be heard all around. Quite true, very weighty indeed, little King Katarinka went on. And you, my Radomirich, my Radomir chick, my Radomir chick, don't you go fancying Mila. Just don't go fancying her, that's it. Katya, keep quiet, Vladislav cried out. I shan't keep quiet. Luida Milka loves you, and you love her. I know that for certain. Katya, Vladislav cried out again, and he headed over to where his sister was standing. Luida Milka, what are you sitting there for? Exclaimed Katya. Stop him. He won't let me have my say. He'll drag me away by force. A brown-haired girl rose from the back row, headed toward Vladislav, and stood in his way. Mila's cheeks had broken out in a soft blush. With a head lowered, she whispered, Your sister is right, Vladislav. I'm so confused. I thought, okay, I'm going to keep reading. Her whisper could be heard through the hushed amphitheater. All heads turned toward little Katarinka. People smiled and applauded her. Inspired by the audience's support, the little girl ran down to Vladimir, who was standing on the stage. She took up a position right beside him and held up her hands to signal the gathering to quiet down. When all were silent, she started speaking again, this time to Vladimir. You know, Radomirchik, you almost played the traitor there. You mustn't criticize my brother. He showed everything fair and square. He's your friend. You're his friend. So don't you criticize. Vladimir glanced down condescendingly at the little girl beside him, and with equal condescension began speaking to her, as well as to the people in the amphitheater. I am not criticizing. I am simply stating a fact. There's not enough pieces of evidence in the hologram he showed. In fact, there's none. There is one, or maybe two, Katarinka firmly declared. And where might they be? if there's two. One of them is me, and the other is you, Vladimir, the little girl confidently stated. With these words, she undid 2 buttons on her dress and bared her shoulder. On Katarinka's left shoulder, Vladimir glimpsed 3 birthmarks, exactly the same as they had seen on the elderly Earthwoman in the hologram. Vladimir examined the birthmarks on the little girl's shoulder, and his blood began rushing through his veins. He concentrated on trying to recall something. Then appeared before him a hologram, which only he could see. A country scene on the earth. There he is, kissing the 3 birthmarks on his beloved's shoulder. Then she gives him a hug. She laughs and rumples his hair and kisses the end of his nose, still laughing as usual. The hologram disappeared. Vladimir looked for a while at the little girl standing in front of him, her shoulder still bared, as before. Then he suddenly bent over, took Katarinka in his arms, and held her close. Embracing him, she rumpled his hair and gave him a quick kiss on the end of his nose. He kept holding little Katarinka in his arms, and she whispered into his ear, "Either you were in a hurry to be born, Vladimirchik, or I was born later than I should have been. Now you must wait while I grow up. Wait 14 years. You won't be happy with anyone else. I'm your better half." "I shall wait till you grow up, my dear," the lad responded quietly. Exhausted by all the excitement, Katarinka now felt calmed down. She put her little head on Vladimir's shoulder and fell into a sound sleep. He stood there silently before the hushed amphitheater, carefully holding in his arms his bride-to-be. With his mind, he began drawing letters of the alphabet in space. Those assembled read the text of the hologram he created. There is proof. It is in each one of us. Love is infinite and eternal in the universe. Then, slowly and carefully, so as to not awaken the little girl asleep on his shoulder, Vladimir headed for the exit. But he had forgotten to turn off the spatial expression of his thought, and so the hologram continued to sprout more letters. The audience realized that these words were not addressed to them, but they could not help reading them. You ran barefoot through the stars, not looking for love, and in no way self-serving. No, never. Throughout infinite space, you alone did preserve what we should be preserving together. These words were intended for a little girl of the planet Arita, as well as for the Earthwoman, the goddess who had given life to their planet. The little goddess slept sweetly on Vladimir's shoulder. Perhaps she too was hearing in her sleep the words of her beloved. That's terrific, Anastasia. That means that when people follow the divine program and give the whole Earth a makeover, they will also have the opportunity to resettle on other planets? Of course. Otherwise, the very existence of other planets in the universe would be meaningless. But he has infused everything with great meaning. The love between 2 people, a dream born in love, is capable of breathing life into any planet. And again, Anastasia, as I understood it, the people who are now building their domains will not die. They will only change bodies and be reincarnated in life on the spot. Of course, their actions on the earth are more needed than anyone else's. They please God. And even people who have never managed to touch the earth with their hands, but have mentally begun to build their own future living corner of paradise, are many times more needful to the divine program than hundreds of wise men sitting behind stone walls, men who have cut themselves off from God's creations, simply talking about God and spirituality. Their words are blasphemous and sad. Death without reincarnation awaits them. They can look forward to a fearful fate, but far from being God's punishment. This is what they have chosen as their own destiny. God has shone forth in the universe with a new thought. It is not only a great energy, but a judge as well. Much has been said in treatises and legends about God's judgment. It is now coming softly and invisibly, God's judgment. It touches all the people now living on the planet, and every man will be his own judge. Whoever chooses life and creates living life will be eternal and resemble the grand creator of the universe. Whoever visualizes death in his imagination is doomed to death by his own thought. It seems as though these words of hers, spoken with a soft and confident tone on the bank of the river Ob, were taken up by the space like an echo over the earth. Over the past 10 years, I have not been the only one who has learnt how Anastasia is able to create the future through her thoughts and words. As my boat took me farther and further up the river, I could still see her standing on the shore. The space around picked up her words on eternal life and repeated them over and over. From what galaxies, or from what worlds of the universe, I all at once began to wonder, did Anastasia appear in her earthly likeness and impart a conscious awareness of eternity to the planet Earth? She is not one to lightly toss out words at random turns, and this has been confirmed in real life. And that being the case, my dear readers, I must offer you my heartiest congratulations on your conscious awareness. We shall live forever, co-creating life in the universe. Till our next joyful meeting, dear friends. End of part 1.